Welcome to the Golden Mike podcast, where personal growth simply isn't enough. I'm your host, Marc, Cordon, a positive psychology coach, a do-gooder from the island of misfit toys who founded the Joy Revolution. Each week I'll wrap with an extraordinary guest doing extraordinary things through their own revolutionary work to talk about the ups, downs, and all-arounds of life. It's my mission to provoke and empower you through increased joy and inspire you to spark your own revolution to change history for the better. Welcome to the most serious happiness podcast in this multiverse. Welcome to the Golden Mike podcast. All right, what is shaking, everyone? It is Marc back on the Golden Mike podcast. I am here with entrepreneur, author, freaking sign language expert, mother, and we've got a whole bunch of other surprises with your roles that have changed over the years. But one of the cool things is I consider you a good friend as well. We have Emily Borja on the show today. Emily, how are you?
I'm great, Marc. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, so there's a million ways I can start. let's get right to it, because I know a lot about you now, and I can't wait for the audience to get to know the Emily now. But I don't know a whole lot about Emily sort of growing up. I know that you grew up in Northern California. Was it four people in your four sisters in your family?
Yeah, I'm number 2 of 4 girls.
Oh, number 2 of 4 girls. Did you feel like you were the invisible one growing up?
You know what? I was highly visible. Like, I was the daughter. I was that daughter. I was the one my dad said made all of his hairs fall out. Not my sisters, just me. So I was pretty visible. Amazing.
Yes. And Irish, German, Catholic. We talk about this a lot. Your Catholic upbringing, right? And I'm guessing if it was a hardcore Catholic family, did you guys go to private school?
My whole life.
What was it? A private Catholic school?
So 1st to 8th grade was private Catholic co-ed, and then high school was all girls private Catholic.
Oh, nice. My high school was all boys too. Jesuits.
I was just gonna say, oh, you're a good Jesuit boy.
I am a good Jesuit boy. Freedom and brotherhood, service, and friendship.
Oh God!
But talk to me. You grew up in a it sounds like a very all-American family, right? Like private school. What was it? Those was your uniform those skirts with the plaid, and then you're like, you guys got to see what she's the face that she's making right now, it just sounds like an all-American family. Is that what you felt growing up?
Yeah. We grew up, loved, and my parents, we were not wealthy and we were not dirt poor. We were right in the middle. My parents both worked, or my mom went back to work when my youngest sister was, I think like in the 2nd or 3rd grade, but like my mom worked retail for a long time, and we always had what we needed, and the Catholic piece, my mom and dad, my dad wasn't even Catholic until they got married. Although he went to a Catholic school, all boys Catholic school in San Francisco, and my mom went to an all girls Catholic school in San Francisco. They actually met at like a Catholic school dance at this bowling alley. So it's very like Greece,
Whoa, so they're like high school.
Yes, right after high school. And my mom only dated my dad. That was her only boyfriend. And we always laugh because my mom used to tell a story about how my dad called her by the wrong name one time when they were dating, and he said it was his drum teacher. Like, because my dad was a drummer. That's how like naive my mom was. And he had a GTO. And so my grandparents were like, oh, I don't know if you can date him because he's very fast, Yeah.
What's a GTO?
I don't know. It's like a muscle car or something.
Okay, that's what I.
Yeah.
So dad was kind of a playboy.
I guess. I mean, and he was a drummer and in a band, and my mom was very my mom was just a really good, nice girl. And she had a lot of siblings that I think now I know later in life she took a lot of care of.
Okay. Yeah. So you're saying now that you know later in life,
yes.
I think I'm picking up on something that I feel is very similar to my family. And, Filipino Catholic families put on a lot of face, in public. When you're in public, um, uh, oftentimes, like, we were the trophy children. Like, oh, look at Mark and his violin recitals, and all this kind of stuff. Was that similar to? Did you have a similar thing where, like, when you're in a public space, it's all happy, happy, joy, joy, and everything shits and giggles?
So you just summed up my entire childhood or my entire growing up life. I can't even, we were the family that, like, there's four daughters, and we would either have the same color on at Christmas Mass or the same dress in different colors. And, like, there was
God,
a whole bunch of stuff going on in the background.
So you were the Fanta girls, and
I mean, I'm telling you, like, everything was about what happened at home and what was happening in our family, which was a lot, stayed there. But when we were out, it was all about showing face and, like, respecting our family and representing our family, and there was a lot of that Irish Catholic denial and reframing and reshaping reality.
I'm curious as to like an example of like that whole idea of denial. Now that you're reflecting back, a couple years later, what were some things that were illuminated to you, or what were some things that you even knew when you were younger, like going on in the family that just wasn't a part of the public persona of the family?
The biggest one. So my dad's family doesn't play a role in our life, right? My dad was estranged from his brothers. His mom was around, but when I talk about family, it's always my maternal side, my mom's side. And so she was the oldest of five, and her baby sister and her are 17 years apart. So my mom's first day of college was her younger sister's first day of kindergarten. And my mom's younger sister is probably the loudest piece growing up. My mom's younger sister was dynamic and fun and class president and star athlete, and, went to USF, University of San Francisco, on a volleyball scholarship, and, like, everybody loved her. And then I think, like a lot of people did in the 70s, started, like, experimenting with drugs and stuff. And I think it's a little bit chicken egg, and I don't know if it matters, but then was diagnosed as paranoid schizophrenic at about, I don't know, maybe 24 or 25. And so our whole life, my whole childhood, was my mom in so much denial about, my aunt went into prostitution and drugs, and we saw a lot of things that a kid shouldn't see. We saw my grandmother get beat up by her. I would stay home from school sick, and my mom would bring me over to my grandparents so that she could go shopping or something, and would, like, leave me there with her because they were still in, like, my sisters and I would keep getting put in situations that were terrifying to us and unsafe because of what we had seen. But my mom's parents and my mom's mother in particular had so much hold over her that there was just a ton of denial. And so that is the loudest thing for my sisters and I, especially for me, because everybody said, I'm just like her. I look just like her. So I spent a lot of my teenage years and 20s thinking, oh my God, this is going to happen to me. I'm going to go crazy. So like when I had early on some bouts of depression and certainly anxiety in my teens and into my 20s, I was like, oh my God, here we go. I'm going to be schizophrenic. This is going to happen to me. And so many hilarious, I mean, I can say they're hilarious now because all my friends know them. At one point she walked through my school. I'm sitting in the 8th grade. I look out into the schoolyard and she's walking in the schoolyard with no pants on, dead serious. And I'm looking out there like, and they're like, isn't that your aunt? I'm like, oh, and I'm like 12, so my friends, so like my closest friends who like have been through these things with me, sometimes we'll just hashtag each other, Mary, put your pants on, because, because it's so absurd. One of my mom's younger brothers, unfortunately passed away of AIDS when it was at the height of its epidemic. Mm-hmm. And he had a longtime partner, like 18 years, and my grandparents, he was accepted, but we never said that word. We knew that Efren was his special friend and all this stuff. And so like we went through that whole thing with him, and it was terrifying. And then he passed away. And to the day my grandmother died, if you asked her, I mean, it's ludicrous. If you asked her what he actually died of, she would say, "Oh, Tommy was allergic to birds." What?
Wow.
Yes, like he got like a bird flu. Like like it's mind blowing because you had to save face, like until we couldn't anymore, until my mom's sister got so sick that it was like everywhere in the community and everyone knew, or until my mom's brother got so ill and so thin that everybody knew, but nobody said it until a week before he died. Like these things that couldn't be contained leaked out.
Now, when it leaked, what ended up happening to the family? Like, what was that, a devastating thing that they had to come to terms with it, or was it something where it was just let's find another adaptation, let's find another way to deal with this instead of confronting it?
I think it was both.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was both. I
Yeah.
think it was, let's clean this up as much as we can. My aunt, my mom's younger sister, and her saga of 30 years of prostitution and drug addiction and mental health and in and out of rehabs and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that really tore at my family and all of our relationships. But there was this thing where you knew you couldn't say much until finally my dad put his foot down, and we didn't see her for like 15 years. Like that, an incident happened, and my dad was like, "It's either you choose her or you choose the kids and I." Mm-hmm. And of course, my mom was like, "Okay." And then when my uncle died, absolutely devastating for so many reasons. We were at a funeral where half the people there, we didn't know this whole other life he had. There's people there just like sobbing and weeping. And that was his whole like gay community. Sure. That wasn't shared with us, obviously. And so it was beautiful and confusing and really kind of swept under the rug after it all went down, and we kept it moving.
How was this for you too? I mean, your aunt is essentially going streaking, outside of your was it high school or grade school?
No, grade school.
Wow. So she's she's outside of your grade school. How was this for you? Because it's being swept under the rug, and then all of a sudden people are like, "Isn't that your aunt?" Was there? What were the emotions you were going through when that happened? I mean, was it? Would you call it traumatizing? Or?
Yes, I had I was terrified of her, absolutely terrified of her because of the violence that I witnessed when she was really high before my grandparents and my family was ready to say, okay, like she has to go, so we saw, here we are, like, in Westlake in, the San Francisco Bay Area, this cute little like community, and she's getting like hogtied by policemen and like howling at the moon because my grandparents had to call the police.
And you saw this?
We saw it. Yeah. And we're there. Or like my mom and dad go out to dinner while we're on vacation. And while we're gone, the phone rings, and it was this guy she was dating, which I think I now know was probably like her pimp. And my grandmother got furious at her, and she just unleashed and beat the crap out of my grandmother. And my sisters and I stood there in the kitchen. Not one of us moved. Like, to think now that and I was 9, and then she passes out, and my grandparents send us downstairs, and my dad comes in the house, right, with my mom, and looks around and goes down to see that my sisters and I are okay. And then he goes upstairs, and he literally picks her up and drops her off the deck and says, like, you better have her on a bus tomorrow, or the girls and I are leaving. And That was really kind of the end of it. But here's the thing. We all went to bed that night in a house where she was. At 9 years old, I was terrified. And no, we didn't talk about it. Nobody came downstairs and said, she's sick, or I'm going to sleep with you so that you're not scared, or should we go to a hotel? I could think about what I would do now with my children, or what I do when they're afraid. Nobody talked about it. We didn't know what was going on. We were just terrified.
And then the other piece of it is sort of the G word, right? Gay. It's like a word that wasn't even used in the house.
No.
Okay, so with your your youngest brother, your mom's youngest brother.
Yeah.
Efron was just the friend.
Efren was his special friend.
And did you ever ask anything about that? Like, or were you old enough to know, like, oh, that's probably his boyfriend?
Oh, when he had been around, holiday. I mean, he was included in everything. He was a mainstay in our family, right? But I think I realized I think I always knew there was something. I just didn't know what to call it. And then in high school, I realized it. And when I did, I think I was probably like a sophomore, and he died right after my senior year. So I didn't really I kind of just started to have this relationship with them where they could be much more open with me and my sisters. And then they died.
Mm, mm, mm. And I guess now, you're the mother of two kids, right?
I am.
And how has this shaped the way that you parent your children? I could see it going a lot of different ways. Oftentimes what happens to the parent, they don't want to see duplicated with their children. For example, when thinking about being picked on when I was younger, and then not wanting my son to be picked on, those sort of things. Do you see yourself making decisions about your parenting based on how you grew up?
Yes. There's this interesting, I think what I have learned through all the therapy and, post my mom's passing away, I had an immense feeling of being loved as a child, but not protected. I was also really bullied as a kid with my weight and stuff like that. And like my mom just kept sending me back to school. And so so to answer your question as a parent, I work really hard on not transferring my own trauma onto my children.
Sure.
I'm very clear about how much I know I was loved, but about the things I don't want to take into my parenting. Things like, my children, gay or straight, their father as well, we're ready no matter what, right? Like that's inclusivity. Our whole family, all my sisters, every grandchild in our family is a different shade, and they all look like my dad. Like we're like the United Nations, which is pretty funny. Every little boy, every nephew of mine, including my son, literally looks like my dad, but they're all different ethnicities, so whatever the kids want to be, and whatever the kids are born with, however they express their gender, whatever, we will go on the journey with them no matter what, and we will talk about it.
Sure.
Sure. And also, just a lot. I don't want to give my children the fear. I think it's not surprising that the way we were raised, my mom didn't raise us to be adventurous. She raised us to be fearless, strong women, but I think it's interesting. My sisters and I are all college educated, a couple of us with advanced degrees. Not one of us left the Bay Area. Not one of us went away to college. We stayed right here. And I don't want to give my children that same feeling that they can't let the bungee cord out.
Was that something that you wanted, to be able to let the bungee cord out at some point?
Yeah, I just think I let it out in different ways.
Like how?
I let it out rebelliously. I let it out. Yeah.
In your 20s and stuff.
In my teens and in my 20s. Yeah. I was the sneak out of the house. And I wasn't a bad kid. I didn't but I was adventurous, and I knew I'm going to shave my head on one side and go to my Catholic school. I'm going to get a tattoo before I graduate high school and just hide it. I'm going to get piercings. All these things that I think I thought were rebellious, which really aren't a big deal, but in our world, they were.
I mean, yeah, that's pretty normal,
Sure, but to my mom was I just kept telling her that my first tattoo was a decal, and I'd cover it with my socks, and she'd be like, "Oh, okay, honey," and she wasn't an idiot. Like my mom was not gullible or dumb. She had this incredible ability to see things the way that made her feel better, so that she could cope. So
yeah,
she was the ultimate survivor.
Well, what's funny is when I got my first tattoo was on my forearm. My mom was like, "What is that?" And I reverted into kid mode, and I was like, "A Sharpie?
Yeah,
Like, wash it off. It's ugly."
Right.
And I was like, I'll wash it off tomorrow, Mom. And so it
Oh,
was,
I'm pretty sure my mom was like, no one's ever going to marry you now. Like, you're never going to get
oh
married
my,
because that's a trampy thing. Like, that's slutty, you know?
that was the word of the, I mean, that was the diss of choice to Mom, with Mom. Like every time something would happen, she'd be like, who's going to marry you now? And I'm like, I don't know, Mom, but like I'm brown and everyone's white. They're not going to marry me anyways. Um, but I think it's really interesting. You talk about this idea of being, of being loved, but not feeling protection. That's like fight or flight, and then like being very high on like Maslow's hierarchy of needs in terms
Yes.
of sense of belonging. Um, what was your relationship with mom, dad, and your sisters like growing up? Was it easy to talk to them? Was it easy to open up to them?
I feel like my life has like, almost like a BC and an A, like I don't even know, a BC and an AD, right? So like that before, like I'm going back, I'm like, is that what you call it? I went to 12 years of Catholic school and I'm not even sure. But I do, I feel like it has two different phases.
Yeah.
I have honestly, like I've done a lot of EMDR therapy and stuff. And like I have blocked out a lot of my childhood because it was, I guess for no other word, like traumatic and scary and completely unsafe.
Like bucked out.
Like I don't have half the memories my sisters have.
Wow.
I don't have memories. I don't remember things like large periods of time, family vacations that my sisters will like laugh about. Like I don't have a lot of that.
That could also, I don't know if it's I'm not completely familiar. I know the technique, but I'm not completely familiar with the outcomes of EMDR. I didn't know that, blocking out memories was one of them. But if you were experiencing true trauma that went into PTSD, that also results in memory loss as well, right?
Oh, for sure. What the EMDR did was let me not have like these visceral responses to certain things anymore.
Okay.
It didn't like uncover memories or anything, but while we were going through things, there was a lot of questions I couldn't answer. And so my relationship with my parents, I would say from like 18 and younger was, I was in trouble a lot. I was afraid a lot. I think what I now know is that I had major anxiety, major eating binge issues as a response to some, I guess we're just going to get into it, sexual trauma. And then after, like, it's like once my sisters and I were not aligned, I think we were all protecting ourselves and couldn't protect each other. So my sisters and I are thick now. Like I'm telling you, like I don't even need other friends in the world. I have them. We're very close, but we weren't I think my two younger sisters were. My older sister she and I had virtually like no relationship before our 20s. And so then it's like we stopped being kids and we're in college, all of us. And then these new people and my parents emerged. And like when my mom died, I really thought like nothing will ever be okay again. I mean, that's how close we all were. My sisters and I used to get on a conference call with my mom every morning at 8 while we were all driving to work. And we'd be like, hey, you're on the 8 o'clock. Like, I really felt like I only needed, at one point, I just used to joke and be like, I only needed my ex-husband to like have children because I just want to raise them with my mom and like walk around with my stroller at the mall. And, I mean, we were all very close and all of my memories are from me like 20 and on. And so I feel like I had two different like growing up experiences, but my experience growing up as a child and as a little girl was painful and scary.
What do you
unsafe.
think the turning point was for mom?
I think my mom, well, I don't know. I think if I'm looking at it, I see so many, I've forgiven her of so much because I'm a mother now as well. And
was
I think
that
also,
a conversation that you, was that a conversation that you had, or was it more so you let it go?
Yeah, we had some really deep conversations while she was sick. And I got to know her in a different way over those 10 months of her being ill. But I think one of the turning points for her was that she could finally breathe, because all she ever wanted was for my sisters and I to be close and take care of each other and that we would be okay. And that means we were educated and we had careers and we were good people. And I think there was this place where my mom started to get to live her life. in the way that she wanted to. When my sisters and I became adults, she started to advance in her career, and like she just started to take better care of herself because I think we were less labor intensive, and she gave herself permission to have a life. And that's one of the things on her deathbed. She always said to me, like, you make your own money, you know your bank account numbers, you have friends, you go on trips with your girl, you have a life outside your husband, no matter what. She taught strong. My sisters and I that. Yeah, she was a badass, you know, and I think I used to, when we'd get into fights, I'd say like, you know, you don't have a backbone. I would say horrible things, you know, like, get a backbone, Mom, like, because I would see her family, what I thought was walking all over her. Or, you know, she'd not understand when I was in a breakup or something devastating with a guy, which I thought was devastating. And I'd just be like, you know, what do you know? Like, you only dated Dad, you know, and her eulogy. Yeah, I got to eulogize her, which was probably one of the greatest honors of my life. And I remember saying, like, I used to say, you know, what do you know of love? Like, your heart's never been broken. And she knew everything about love because her heart had never been broken. My dad never broke her heart. They had a beautiful relationship, and she knew so much more than I gave her credit for. You know, yeah.
When did your mom pass?
December 5th of 2010.
Oh, wow. That's almost 10 years ago.
Yeah, I can't believe it. It's insane.
Yeah.
She was only 61.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she was super young.
Yeah.
And had always been healthy.
Now, you were talking about, you know, your mom only being with, not only, your mom having the privilege of being with one person.
Yeah.
That's so, to me, that's so awesome because, like, I don't have to, there's nothing to compare it to. It's just like.
This is like going down the road where I start getting nauseous because I'm like, oh my God, now I'm talking about my mom and dad.
It's the best and worst way ever. God, I'm going to keep going there. So how was it talking to your mom about dating and like you're like, oh, I'm getting nauseous. It's almost like I feel like that's your mom coming out of you. Yeah, I'm getting nauseous. But
totally.
Like, how was it to talk about boyfriends and liking people and stuff like that?
We didn't. I didn't. Oh. I kept my.
Was it like Filipino? Like I'd introduce my my partners as my friend.
Definitely. And in my house, you couldn't car date. My parents called it car dating. You couldn't car date till you were 16. And if a boy didn't walk up to the door and didn't open our door, my dad would come back outside and say, get in the house.
Oh, your pops was all about chivalry.
Oh, he is a gentleman's gentleman. Like my dad, they don't make him like him anymore. I mean, wow. The guy is yeah, he's phenomenal. I never once in my life saw him disrespect my mom. And there was this one time, it's my friend, I think it's my friends, like one of their favorite stories. And we still laugh so hard. I think I was like 17. And I didn't know my dad was home. And I turned to my mom and I think I said something to her like, God, will you shut up? And like, that was pushing it for me. Like I had a mouth on me, but that was not typical for me to talk to her that way. Sure. Anyway, I did. And like, I swear to God, like Jesus Christ himself, there appears my dad in the doorway. And he just looked at me and he was like, don't ever talk to my wife like that. And I was like, oh, fuck, he said my wife. Like, and I just remember thinking like, I have two choices. I can just get down and like cover my head because I'm dead, or I can like run and never come back. You know what I mean? We had constant reminders of that throughout our life from my father, that my mom was first, right. No matter what.
Right.
No matter what.
Hey, it's Marc. I hope you're digging the Golden Mike podcast. If you have or are just starting your own revolution fueled by joy, there's a site I created for you. If you, like me, believe that personal growth is simply not enough, if you, like me, are committed to changing history for the better in both micro and macro ways, check out joyrevolution.com. In there, you'll find an archive of our over 200 Golden Mike Live Facebook shows, and of course, our podcast that you're currently listening to. Check out the blogs highlighting how positive psychology and joy theory apply to your everyday life. There's even some cool clips from our Joy Revolution course geared towards influencers, speakers, writers, and change agents. It's all there. Go to joyrevolution.com. That's joyrevolution.com. Let's get back to the episode. I know at a really young age, you talked to your mom about possibly liking a girl in school. How did that go?
So I was 13. I was a freshman in high school, and there was a senior in high school, in my high school, and we got to be friends. And anyway, this kind of dramatic friendship had ensued, and probably much more for me because I was younger. And I think there was a moment when I realized, I was really lost as a freshman too. Like, all of my friends went to a different school and I went to this school, but my sister was a senior, but we weren't really close. So she didn't really like kind of take me under her wing at all. And I was kind of, before I discovered dance and stuff in high school, which I did at the end of my freshman year, I really floundered in the beginning to kind of find my place. And so this girl and I got to be friends, and she was so, like, I just remember thinking she was so cool. Like, she used to wear a leather jacket with her skirt, and like, I remember in an EMDR session, I said something like, and then I saw her come down the hallway, and like, her legs look so good in her skirt. And all of a sudden I took my headphones off and I was like, what I'm so gay. Like, oh my God, I can't believe I just said that. I've never said that out loud. So anyway, yes, like, we're writing notes back and forth. And anyway, I get home and I've realized now, like, oh my God, I think she maybe likes me. What if I like her? Is there like some like radar or scent I'm giving off? Does she know something about me? And the doom I felt was...
Now, was she out?
No.
Okay.
No. Okay. No. But yeah, so no. And I don't even think that was I have no idea. No. And so here I run in the house and I go up to my mom and I'm hysterical, and she stops folding laundry and she sits down with me. And yeah, I said, I'm so scared. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I was just bawling about, I don't even think I knew the word gay. I just said, like, what if I like girls? What if this is true about me? And my mom my mom's like the Olivia Pope of the crime sweep your family world. She'll just clean that shit right up.
She was the wolf. She was
for sure
from Pulp Fiction.
And I don't. Oh God, yes. And I don't think she was. I think she would have been okay if I knew this about myself, but because she saw how terrified I was, and I think because she truly didn't want that for me, because life in her eyes would be harder. She launched off into, I've told you this before, Mark, that ridiculous story about like, tell me why you think this. Do you like her back? And, I don't know. And she says, oh, Emily, there are times that I will go to J.C. Penney's. That's the department store where she worked when I was little. Right. It was like Mervyn, like the equivalent of Mervyn's. I don't know what they have everywhere, but it's a West Coast thing. So she says,
I'm loving this
serious
Midwest accent, by the way.
I mean, dead serious. She's like,
was it that thick, her Midwest accent?
No, because we're West Coast. We're not Midwest. But we are. So yeah. So she had a very like, oh, honey, So yes.
Okay, gotcha.
That was Betty Ann's own. My friends can mimic her. Like, we all know how to get into Betty Ann character. And so she's like, oh, honey, there are times that I will go to JCPenney's to the store and I will pick out some dresses and I'll go into the dressing room and I'll put them on and I'll look at myself and I'll think, gee, I look pretty. And she leans in closer. Now that doesn't make me a lesbian. And I was like, okay. And I remember thinking like, that's enough for me. This is too scary. And she, and then I think we went downstairs and had like a snack and that was it. I never talked about it again. I did not say it again. I did not actively suppress things. Mm-hmm. There were times that, as I got on later in life, I had, no shortage of fun and promiscuity. And I think that there were times that would come up in me, but it would be more like, oh, I'm just fun and wild and I'm up for anything and blah, blah, blah.
A wild college girl.
Totally.
Right?
Totally. Yeah. And no, I never said those words again because I just think that gave me a message of nope. And all she did was tell me that story, and we didn't ever talk about it again.
Well, I mean, you met basically your spouse, your husband in what 2006?
Yes,
2006, and on paper it it was like the best of marriages, right?
Oh, 100%.
Like he was your, or you talked, it's no surprise. You said he's your ex now, but he was your soulmate.
For sure. At the time, yes. So, I mean, I had, prior to being with him, the 2 years before, I had gone through really like one or two really bad breakups, and I had stopped drinking. I had stopped partying. I had gone back to school. I had gone to a lot of therapy. Like I had got my shit together. And I was like, oh, this is what you attract when you've got your head on straight. And I had never been treated like that before, never been loved in that way before.
Did he hold the door for you?
100%. He stood, we would walk down the street and he'd stand on the side of the traffic. Like he's an old school military gentleman. His father's a gentleman. Like I was accustomed. I had never been treated like that, but that was a no brainer for him,
And you had 2 kids together.
We did.
But in between having the 2 kids, mom left.
Yep. Yeah, we had children right away. And 3 weeks after my son was born, my mom was diagnosed. And then 10 months later, she had gone. Yeah, she passed away. So that really ripped a hole. As new parents, I had postpartum, and then just losing my mom, like that was really the beginning of the end for us. Like we really never got to take off, right? Like we met in 06 and 07, we were engaged in 2008, married 2009, Joaquin was born 2010, my mom died. Like we just never really laid a solid track.
But let me talk about that those few years before mom passed. You met your partner. Can we say his name?
Yeah, Gene.
Gene. Okay. You know what?
I call him Gene. Everybody else calls him Gino, but I call him Gene.
Okay. So Gene, would you say that was the happiest moment? Like that was the most happy and joyous moment when you had your mom, you had kids. You know what? Ostensibly, it's perfect for your family because you guys have the perfect family, like the chivalrous husband, the amazing wife, and 2 kids. In my mind, I could see that being like, yeah, I achieved it. I achieved all that stuff without having to go through the shame, and I didn't have to go through a mental breakdown. And here I am. I got it. I deserved it. Like, was that truly what was going through your head?
Yeah, I think my life there have always been things running parallel, right? This happiness and a crisis at the same time. That has absolutely stayed true for a long time. And so, yes, I fell in love with him. Yes, I had the most self-worth I had ever had because I had worked so hard on myself. And then here comes him, and he was, all the boxes were checked. And, and then we certainly fall in love, and I have 13 bridesmaids. My wedding was the most fun party on the planet. I mean, come on, and we do the whole thing. And then 6 months after we get married, I'm pregnant. And that was a very joyous time for the 2 of us. He was so proud of me pregnant. And that was probably the most smooth our marriage was. And then Joaquin was born and my mom got sick. And then it was, here I am, this joyous, beautiful, really stunning baby. I got to say, he was not ugly. He was a really beautiful baby. And here's Gene taking to fatherhood, and I couldn't take to motherhood, right? I had a lot of postpartum. I remember going, oh my God, we did this to ourselves. All I wanted to do was get in bed and lay with my mom. I just wanted to hand this baby to Gene and say, he wanted to be a father from the day that we met. I remember at our first dinner saying to him, like, listen, if you want like a mother to your kids and all that kind of stuff, like, I'm just not there. And he was like,
really?
Okay. Oh yeah. I said right away, like, don't try and like wife me and all that. Like my career's going amazing. And I was very like like hear me roar, kind of almost trying to like scare him away and see what he would do.
What were you doing career-wise?
I was building my sign language interpreting career.
Okay. So that was the entrepreneur.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh yeah. And
Were you scaring him away? Did you want those deep down inside? Did you
I
want
think I wanted those things deep down, but I thought like, maybe that's not for me, because I had been in long relationships before and no one had ever picked me as the prize. The two significant men that I had been with in my life for years at a time didn't marry me, but but not shortly after each of us had broken up, they did get married. So I think I had in the back of my mind that I wasn't marriage material and I didn't want to go down that road again.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And when you add that to messages of who's going to marry you if you wear a tattoo,
Right.
all those things put together can definitely fuck with your mindset, right?
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that even during the most joyous time of your life, you were talking about going into crisis mode. Were you anticipating, like, you're like, oh my God, things are almost going too good right now. Something's gonna happen. Did you have that kind of mindset?
I was going to say, that's the way I have lived since that has happened. No, I had never known crisis in the way I had not experienced, I think, awareness of crisis mode until my mom got sick. That was the most significant thing I think that had happened to me up until that point. That was an absolute turning period in my life, in my motherhood career, daughter, wife. That was the most devastating thing that had happened to me. Even childhood trauma and stuff. My mom dying was what ensued the chaos that would continue for the next 8 years.
What turned?
Say again?
You said it was a turning point. What turned for you?
Well, her getting turning point meaning
like after, maybe I misinterpreted what you were saying, but you were like, her getting sick was not only devastating, but it was a lot of things turned for you afterwards.
Turned for the worse.
Okay, turned for the worse. How so?
A huge divide between he and I. We could not communicate at all. I was so devastated and sad, and I think he was so resentful and angry that he was almost like a single father with this new baby, and I couldn't find any joy in it. And so he was not supportive at all when my mom was ill, or not in the way I think I wanted at that time. And I could
it to be.
Oh, I think I always dreamed of being able to come home and just fall into someone and have them really understand and just feel that emotional safety. And I now know why I couldn't feel that. But at the time, I blamed him for not being able to provide it. And I don't even think I was open to it, right? So there's been a lot of healing, but that was what I globbed onto. And we fought a lot while my mom was sick and while our first child was a baby, but you wouldn't have known it. A lot of people didn't know it because I was, boy, am I my mother's daughter. I can make like, oh, are you kidding? Everything was, I think people thought like, wow,
The American family again, duplicate.
For sure. Because that's what the pillar of success was for me. That's what I wanted, is to show the husband and the wife. I don't even think I was conscious of it. That's just what I had been striving for. That was success. That's what I was supposed to want.
Sure. You saw
and
it.
I did want it.
You saw it as a child, and it was replicated again in the future. I think,
and the shame around not feeling, hugging or holding your child and not feeling true joy. There's a whole other piece of that that's like, that women don't necessarily talk about. What is wrong? How was I supposed to feel joy? I try to think about the Emily then, 10 years ago, and go like, God, how traumatized, like, you just had a baby, your mom's dying, like there was a lot going on, and but we took it out on each other, and the divide between us was palpable.
Oh, sure. Well, and I mean, the thing is, when you were talking about postpartum, it's oftentimes an underreported stat, and it's a huge stat. A lot of folks are postpartum, and it looks like it's going to be going up as more people report it. Yeah.
I also had antepartum, and so I was put on medication, antidepressants, while I was pregnant, because they thought that the anxiety and depression I was experiencing while I was pregnant was more detrimental than the risk of a Class C medication.
Wow.
And so that was also really scary, because it's like I loved being pregnant, and at the same time it was so terrifying, and so I had this piece of this kind of lingering depression while I was pregnant, and then this happiness when it happened. And then my mom gets sick almost immediately. And I'm like, the deep shame of not feeling content with this happy, healthy baby. Like, I work in a pediatric hospital. I know that lots of babies are not born healthy and beautiful. And we didn't even have to try. We looked at each other and I got pregnant, like, and here I am with this blessing.
I don't think so.
Well, maybe a little more than that, but it was pretty easy.
That in Catholic school, but I don't think so.
We did not have to struggle,
We were taught about the stork that delivers it. When a man,
oh, for sure.
When a man and woman, beep, and then they change the slide projector.
Yes,
love each other. Beep, stork comes, and then Jesus is there with the stork. So one of the things that I'm recognizing is from a very early age, Emily, you talked about this idea of you felt loved, but then there was something like a lack of protection that you felt, right?
Yes.
And so like it would make sense that you felt joy, like I made it in those first 3 years. And then mom goes downhill and in 10 months is gone. And it almost reinforces that idea of, oh, every time I feel loved, something shitty is going to happen. Or every time I feel like something good is happening,
yes,
something bad will probably happen.
And that continued for the next several years, right? There was always this, how amazing, oh my God, like thing that happened that would coincide.
How was it? How could you truly be content with that? Because it's like you're happy, but also at the same time, like, in the back of your mind, you're almost expecting something to happen. Mm-hmm. Like, were you truly content?
No. No. I've been a worrier. I absolutely have suffered from anxiety and continue to. It's really well managed now. But I think at the time, I must have, if I'm thinking about it now, had this thing in the back of my head where this is as good as it gets for you. So you don't get to be content, but things are better than they were. Or like, I don't even think I stopped to think about being content because so much happened so fast.
Sure.
A week after my mom died, I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. And so that helped me really that helped me have something to focus on. So I didn't necessarily have to go through the pain of grieving her. But then when she was born, 6 months later, all hell broke loose again.
When you found out your second was on the way, when you found out that Isla was on the way, were you excited about it?
Oh, so excited.
Okay, so you were.
Oh, so excited.
You're grieving and excited at the same time.
Exactly. And I'm like, oh, like definitely, I knew it was going to be a girl. I was like, oh, my mom definitely sent her to me. Like, this is going to be joy for the family. I did that whole, like, there's a death and then a new life coming, and like really put myself, I was sick as fuck with Isla. I was so sick with Isla the whole time. But my body didn't love being pregnant, that's for sure. But here's this joyous thing, and I'm starting to focus on my son more and feeling like I'm getting to know him more. And then I get to focus on being pregnant, and I didn't have to necessarily grieve my mom. And we grieved her a lot. We knew she was dying, so we did a lot of grieving while she was here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you've been talking about this pattern. Good things happen, shitty things happen. Then the shitty happened.
Yeah.
Jean.
Yeah.
Talk about Jean.
So our second child was born in September of 2011, right? So my mom had passed. I'm pregnant. We are at a not a great place in our marriage, right? But this pregnancy kind of brought things back together, I guess, temporarily, or kind of put a Band-Aid on things.
Are you a stay together for the kids type of woman? Or were you at the time?
Yes.
Okay.
But I didn't, there was this, well, yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll get into that. But what I thought we lacked in like chemistry or connection, I thought that was for Emily and her, not like in her fun, wild days. And what I had was, and what I still have as him as a father, is this really like ride or die great guy. So don't tempt fate. You don't get to have it all, right? Yeah. And he's handsome and smart and kind and a family man. And And so at that point, I wasn't advanced enough in thinking about maybe this is not for us. We had some arguments before where we said, what are we doing? But now here we're with a 2-year-old and an infant. Like, it wasn't even a question. It was like,
it wasn't,
yeah, really nice. But like, how would we even afford? Like, it just wasn't even on the radar.
Gotcha.
But we had tossed it around, and actually Isla was born, and Isla's born.
And that's 2011, I think.
That's 2011. Yeah. Joaquin just turned 2.
Okay.
We actually started going to marriage counseling.
Okay.
And put it out there and talked about splitting. I don't think we were in it long enough.
Okay.
And while I can remember, like, the week before everything went down with him, I mean, we had the carrier in the room with us, with the therapist, and talking about, like, holy moly, I don't know if we made a mistake, right? But how are we going to fix things? And then a week later he gets...
You have depression, postpartum?
I think undoubtedly I did.
Okay.
But I don't think, once you have 2 kids, you don't get to be depressed. I think I had this baseline level of depression, but like, I was still going to work, still teaching dance, still doing my thing, right? I think I just learned, I think it was a lot like my mom. I think she had a baseline of depression and anxiety, but I think to other people, I looked like I was thriving,
Right.
I wasn't like, it's not like I couldn't get out of bed or anything.
Right.
And then he starts kind of exhibiting these like cold-like symptoms, these flu-like symptoms, and
a week after the therapy.
A week after that, yeah, I sent him to the doctor. He gets an antibiotic. It's not really working. He's coming home and falling asleep, like taking Motrin, really not. And I'm like, dude, suck it up. I have like a new baby and a 2-year-old, and we were not in a good place. And I was, and finally I took the day off, and I was like, I'm taking you to the doctors myself, like as if I'm his mom, right? So I go and I take him, and we're talking to the doctor, and I'm like, can we, I work in healthcare, right? So I'm like, can we just get a blood panel? Like, I want to like check some things here, because he's been on 2 antibiotics. Nothing's working. He feels like crap. Like, this is not normal, and he's got this dry cough and blah, blah, blah. So she's like, oh, Mrs. Borja, like, it's flu season. And I was like, hey, that's great. But like, give me, like, someone's going to give me some blood tests here. So she sends them for him. Now, the next day I go to work, and I'm at the hospital, and I'm paged overhead. And like, they never page me. Like, sign language interpreter is important there to communicate. Like, I'm not a surgeon, like, they're not paging me overhead. Like, there's no like communication emergency at that moment, right?
Well, what code is that for the?
I mean, I don't know. I have no idea. Happy Hands code, or like, I don't know what. Like, they would have no reason to page me, right?
Code.
And like, I have a page,
Emily,
right? Yeah. So they're like, Emily Borja, and pick, so, and it's my boss is really trying to get a hold of me, and so she basically patches me through, and it's the doctor, and she's like, listen, we haven't called your husband yet. Okay, wait, I have to back up for a second. Hold on. The night before, I'm up at like 2:00 in the morning. We're renting what I considered our dream home. We're renting it, but it was like in the best neighborhood in this one area, and it was beautiful, and I loved it. It was huge. And I'm up on the internet, and like, this is so bizarre. I can't even believe I'm going to say this. My son had just gotten a biopsy for these bites that he had all over his body. We could not figure out what they were. We had torn his room apart. I made Jean pull up all the carpet. My poor son is the only one who's got these spots. It looked like chicken pox at first, right? And I was pregnant at the time that all this was happening. And then Isla's born, and Isla has these reoccurring urinary tract infections, and she's an infant, right? So she's got to have all these tests done, and like, what is going on? And they find out like it's fungal, and like something is, and then Jean's not feeling well. So the night before, or the night after he got the blood test, I'm up and I'm on the internet, and I'm just like, something is wrong with my family. And I come across, somebody says to me, like, have you ever looked into mold? And we had some visible mold in our home, and the landlord kind of just left it off or whatever. But, I end up calling a company, and they come out and they do all this stuff. So it turns out we did have this aspergillus and like black mold or whatever, which could have potentially triggered, he always had a predisposition to this diagnosis, but this could have brought it out earlier. Sure. But anyway, so I'm at the hospital, and I answer the call, and it's basically an oncologist and his doctor saying, listen, we haven't called him yet, but sorry. So the night before, I look at his blood work. It came back in. So I look at it, and I know in healthcare that 11 platelets is not good. I also know that a white blood cell count of 50,000 is not good. But I also know it's elevated when you have an infection. So I felt kind of nauseous, and I closed it. I just closed the computer, and I went to bed. So the next day when they paged me, they said like...
suppression, if you will.
Right. they said, you need to go home and we need to get your husband and you need to bring him in right now. Like, we have to rule some things out. And I'm like, tell me what we're dealing with. And she's like, well, I have an oncologist on the phone. And like the room just started to spin. And she's like, we're looking at leukemia. I'm going to be honest with you. And I was like, I'm like, what? So here's a hematologist, oncologist saying, please come in. We'll meet you at the emergency room. Right. So I go home and at the same time, the mold people had come that day as well. And they suggest that we pack some stuff. Jean had stayed home from work. They suggest that we pack some stuff and get out of that house for a little bit because they've got to do some further testing. And it didn't look good, I guess. And so here I am, we're like the Clampetts, like the hillbillies. I've gone packing all this stuff. I'm trying to get Jean to the hospital. I call my sister, and anyway, Jean, we pull over, Jean's in the car. We're going to the hospital. I've got the kids with me. And Jean just starts vomiting uncontrollably. And like all of a sudden his neck is swollen out like he's a linebacker. And all this has happened in like the last 2 hours. So basically, we get to the ER and 3 days later, he was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And it's a pediatric cancer. And it's really aggressive in adults. And, they said, get your affairs in order and 30% survival rate post 5 years. And chemo is going to be at least 3 years long because it has a high disease memory. And this is going to bring him to the edge of the world and back. And chemo means a week in the hospital every single month for the next couple years. So it was just absolutely terrifying. Financially, our life imploded. Emotionally, I remember when the doctor came in to tell us, because they did think for a minute it was this weird strand of mono, and he's an elementary school teacher. So, here I am praying for mono, and she's like, I'm sorry, it's not. And we didn't embrace in the room. We looked at each other, and I turned around and looked out the window, and he just put his hands in his head. Of course, we hugged after that, but our initial reaction wasn't to come together, right? And I remember later on that night being in the hospital lobby by myself. It was like 3:00 in the morning, and I remember saying, like literally talking to God and saying like, oh my God, we are not strong enough right now to withstand this. Like, show me what to do. Like, I will change everything. Like, please do not like rip the rug out from under us. I don't want to be a widow at 36, 37. I don't want my children to not have a dad. Like, I wasn't valuing my marriage in the way I should. Like, I'm on it. And that began, the next 4 years of just hell. He was very, very sick.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So basically, you're in full-on caretaker mode.
100%.
Full-on caretaker mode, because I'm taking it that he was pretty much bedridden for 4 years.
Yes.
I hope you enjoyed the Golden Mike podcast. There's more good stuff coming your way. But until the next episode, let's stay in touch, yes? Find us on Instagram as The Joy Rev, or communicate with like-minded revolutionaries in our Facebook group. Search The Joy Revolution Underground. And of course, don't forget to check out the classes, articles, blogs, and some serious fun at joyrevolution.com. That's joyrevolution.com. Now, until then, what will you do to change history for the better? Let's go out and play, shall we? Press start to begin.